Transfer portal starting to simmer. Not yet open. The Monday after conference championship games finish, we'll have just essentially college football Black Friday. The transfer portal starting to buzz a little bit. Not yet boiling. It's simmering a little bit. You got a lot of names now starting to say, hey, we're planning to enter, or as grad transfers already in there. A couple of names jumped in there already that I think are worth talking about. Julian Humphrey, a guy we spoke about a second ago, has announced his intentions to hit the portal. A Georgia corner now, and you say, okay, he's that transfer from Georgia. He must not have really been able to get on the field then. No, he started 10 games this year. Dude is rangy, 6 foot, long arms, 190, has played a massive role in different games for Georgia. The thing with him that I think is interesting is, like, this is what I just said a few moments ago. Like, this is not some slappy that couldn't cut it at Georgia. And the schools that are being mentioned with him, I think, kind of indicate as much. Texas, that's kind of a funny conversation. You got Georgia playing Texas and Julian Humphrey considering Texas. I digress. Texas A&M in the mix, it sounds like. Bama, Oregon, Miami, a lot of the usual suspects when you talk about the transfer portal. But we know about those teams, they're not going after, like, the scraps in the portal. They're going after some top dogs, no pun intended. Worth noting, too, Julian Humphrey from the state of Texas. Anytime you see a guy leave his state and then hit the portal, as Julian Humphrey did, going to Georgia from the state of Texas, I always feel a little bit like, man, if you could do it a second time, it's got to be a little bit appealing to have the potential to come home and play in front of family and friends and all that. So Julian Humphrey, going to be sought after. Sounds like he's already pretty highly sought after by nature of the schools that are mentioned in relation to him. Dude can play. So keep an eye on Julian Humphrey. Obviously we will as the portal continues to churn. Miller Moss, USC quarterback. That first game of the year, man, it was like, okay, Heis Miller, baby, it's back. Because the first game of his career, really, where he started against Louisville, he was slicing and dicing. I mean, he's blowing up the timeline. Vibes are immaculate. And then this year happens, and he doesn't have a bad year by any stretch. Didn't have the year that USC needed is probably a better way to say it. I want to make sure we say this very clearly. Miller Moss was not the problem at USC. USC has a myriad of other problems. Miller Moss is a good quarterback. Miller Moss is going to help somebody. The schools that are being tied to him as of right now, Michigan, interesting. Remember, Bryce Underwood, probably going to compete for playing time early, you'd have to believe. Still going to be a true freshman quarterback. If you don't know who I'm talking about, the number one player in all of high school football, Bryce Underwood, committed to Michigan from the state of Michigan. But if you're the Wolverines, it might not be the worst thing in the world to bring in an experienced commodity like a Miller Moss who has 1 year left. Would make some sense. I'm also curious to see what happens offensively for Michigan there. I don't think they will be a team that sits back on the wall when it comes to how they approach the portal. Michigan's going to go ham in the portal. They're going to get some guys for Miller Moss to throw the football to if they do, in fact, land Miller Moss. Iowa, interesting with Iowa. They have kind of that portal blueprint when it comes to the quarterback position. Cade McNamara goes there. I think in some ways you could say he helped himself when it comes to what he wants to do in the future. Speaking of the future, though, like a lot of these quarterbacks that hit the portal with 1 year left, they want to help their draft stock. Now, I haven't spoken to Miller Moss personally. I have to believe that's a factor for him going forward here. Who better, though, to help his NFL draft stock than a guy who used to coach the NFL and Tim Lester, the current OC at Iowa. So that's one to keep an eye on. And Louisville also is interesting. Track record with portal quarterbacks as well from a Tyler Shuck. This past season makes sense. Just a couple of schools to keep an eye on. That's including but not limited to those schools in the mix for a one Miller Moss. Kaidon Salter. I said this yesterday and caught some heat for it, but that's fine. If I were doing a draft of the available portal quarterbacks, I think based on production, based on mobility, based on where college football is right now and the kind of skill set you need to have success at a high level, I love Liberty quarterback Kaidon Salter. He might be my first quarterback off the board if I'm taking the available transfer portal quarterbacks in a draft right now. Now, this cycle is going to continue to progress. That's okay. So Kaidon Salter right now for us would be the first pick. Will he be the first pick in 2 weeks' time? Remains to be seen. He jumped in last year to the transfer portal to Kaidon Salter and ended up withdrawing his name and going back to Liberty. Auburn is going to be the school to watch here, for us at least. The tie to Hugh Freeze and that offense makes a lot of sense. Auburn is, I think for most people, the school that needs a portal quarterback more than anybody, or at least if you were putting an importance on a position for them, that'd be the one that's probably at the top of the list. I think Syracuse being tied to him is a little bit interesting because the portal quarterback success they had with Kyle McCord, I don't know who wouldn't want to play for Fran Brown tomorrow. That guy is, an absolute stud. I think that Syracuse has got a tremendous trajectory going forward. Also, fun offense to play in. How many of us wrote off Kyle McCord after he wasn't the guy at Ohio State. They lost to Michigan, and we're saying it's Kyle McCord this, it's Hunter McCord that. And then what happens? Kyle McCord goes out and gets buckets. Just out quarterback dueled Cam Ward and knocked them out of ACC title contention. So there's a track record there. There's a blueprint for success there for Kaidon Salter. I think he's going to be highly sought after and have his fair share of options. This might be the biggest fish in the portal right now, for my money at least. NC State wide receiver Kevin Concepcion. Not Kevin Concepcion, Kevin Concepcion. All right? A little bit of an accent on there. Sounds like the Big Ten and the SEC is going to be a priority for him. Worth noting, though, his younger brother currently committed to Kansas State. Interesting. Not a Big Ten or SEC school, but if you got the chance to go play with your little brother, you don't think that would maybe be appealing? I digress. If I'm him, I want to go somewhere where I can know that I got a quarterback for me and I'm getting the football, and I don't have to worry about that quarterback being able to get me the football, if that makes sense. Some schools that are mentioned with him are also the schools like a Colorado, an Auburn, Penn State. Colorado, we'll see what they are at quarterback next year. You would expect Julian Lewis, the true freshman, to compete for that job. Penn State, is Drew Aller a guy that leaves for the NFL this year? Remains to be seen. At Auburn, again, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. The thing that's interesting about Kevin Concepcion, I think he can pretty much go where he wants. I don't think anybody's looking at Kevin Concepcion and what he did at NC State the last couple of seasons saying, nah, we're good. The thing that I think is curious with him, I'm fascinated by his timeline because the schools that I just mentioned, Auburn, Penn State, schools across the SEC, Alabama potentially, I'm curious to see if we see Kevin Concepcion make a decision before all the portal quarterback dominoes fall into place. Just food for thought there, but he's going to be highly sought after. He's a dude as much of a can't miss as there is in the transfer portal as of right now. One more guy that jumped in or is going to jump in, Micah Hudson, Texas Tech wide receiver. Now, if that name sounds familiar, because this time last year, 5-star plus caliber kind of player, commits to Texas Tech. Sounds like playing time for him will be a massive factor. Only played 6 games this past year in Lubbock. When you talk to folks about Micah Hudson, one of the first things you hear is like, okay, from the state of Texas, got it, but not really a Texas target necessarily, or he's not targeting Texas, a better way to say it. So if it's not going to be the hometown Longhorns, the schools that are being tied to him as schools to watch are Texas A&M and Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma just landed themselves a new offensive coordinator yesterday in Ben Arbuckle. And they went nuts out there in Pullman. Absolutely bonkers last year with how they operated offensively. John Mateer, we'll see what he does, and if he ends up being a guy that changes schools in the future as well. But all I'll say is Washington State last year averaged 8.5 yards a pass, one of the best averages in college football. I'm Micah Hudson. I want to go play. I want to catch the football. I want to have explosive plays. Ben Arbuckle might be your guy, so we'll keep an eye on those as they progress. I mentioned a bunch of names there. I mentioned a bunch of schools that are, schools to watch for these different prospects. We're going to have a segment here in the next couple of weeks as the portal gets a little bit more populated, portal predictions. So those are just schools to keep an eye on. We'll call our shot here on portal predictions for these guys going forward and have a lot of fun doing so. So another reason to be subscribed.